Yeah, I'm excited to present this to you all today. This is disposable software, how we're going to turn messy data into a working tool in 20 minutes. Spoiler alert, using agentic AI. And so this is a topic I'm really passionate about. I'll be excited to go through you. Just a little note on how I like to give presentations like this one. I try to go really light on slides. We're going to have a hands-on section where I'm going to swap out of this Gamma presentation and into VS Code and actually show you the working tool that we're going to create. So fingers crossed that the AI cooperates the way we'd like it to. But I really like it to be collaborative. It was really great hearing all of your backgrounds. Some of you I've already met before from previous meetups, but I really like to question and answer and kind of hear a dialogue and discussion because I've gained a lot from, going to presentations and meetups like this. But the thing I've, appreciated the most is when I can kind of contextualize it to my life and my background. So I'm jumping in. I have a couple pause points during the presentation where I'll kind of open it up for any questions. If not, all good, we'll keep moving. And then I have a Q&A section at the end. So we'll get going. Yeah. Just a little bit of today's agenda. So there's me right there. Just a little bit of background. I'm the founder of Codi Technologies. We're a software development company based here in Portland, Oregon now. I'm from the Northwest. I recently moved up here from California, actually just about 6 weeks ago. So relatively recently. Um, but I run a small team building AI native solutions. And I, was building software kind of the old way before that for quite a while. And we had a team, we did it that way. And then over the last really just couple of years, we've really transformed the way we think about not only the way we do work, but how we build the team and the kinds of products we build and the way we build them. So that's what we're going to run through today. Some outcomes that I want you to achieve from today's call. So we're going to introduce some concepts. The first one being AI native, and the second is disposable software. These are, two terms that are kind of on the cutting edge of technology. So I want to talk about, what does AI native mean? Discuss like how is that showing up maybe in your workday, and really applying AI beyond what I would kind of consider to be like the simple tasks, like helping me write an email or reviewing a document. AI native solutions could take us a lot farther than that. So that's one thing we'll walk through. The second is kind of differentiating between, what I would say capital S software development, which has all of the formal processes that we should still adhere to in this agentic world. We don't need to get rid of any of that. But what I want to talk about is giving yourself permission to, as mostly developers here, also not follow those principles for this kind of disposable software. We can do things all the right way for things that need to go into production. But I'm going to talk about some problems that we can use coding agents for that actually step outside a little bit of traditional software development and how we can apply that to, solve annoying problems, make us more productive, and do all that stuff. So my hope is you leave today, really tonight's presentation with something that you can try out tomorrow. Really quick before we get into it, a little bit about me. I love building things. It's why I became a developer in the first place. I was obsessed with technology from a very young age. My very first computer was a Windows 95 computer that had no internet access that my parents weren't using anymore. They put it in my room, and I just used that thing all the time. I took it apart, put it back together. I love making little tiny pieces of custom software on it. And I feel really lucky that I've been able to take that building mindset into the career that I have today. I also really like playing games and particularly winning them. And that's why I brought this little image of Battleship here. Quick show of hands. Is anyone here familiar with the game Battleship? It's a little, maybe it looks a little bit more modern than that, but okay. Yeah, so we're pretty familiar for the most part. For anyone who doesn't know, it's a two-player game. This is the like retro version of the box, but the idea is pretty simple. You have your pieces arranged on a board. The other player does not know where those pieces are, and you take turns going back and forth guessing, is your ship over here on coordinate G4? Is that a hit? Is that a miss? It's a game I really liked growing up. this picture on the box I picked because this kind of represents a scene that was in my house growing up. That would be like me, the little kid, and then that would be my dad right there, and we'd be playing Battleship together all the time. The problem was he was way better at the game than me. And it was something that always stuck with me. It's something that we kind of laugh about, but it was a lot of me just kind of getting beat up by him. And I share that example because we still play Battleship sometimes. And I think this will kind of set the stage of what agentic development can do for us, even outside the world of building software, for production use. In this game of Battleship, we were playing it, and I was thinking, you know what? Battleship is kind of a deterministic game. There's a lot of probability that goes into it. Maybe you have a mental model if you're an engineer like me of like, where should I go next? But I was like, there's got to be a way to solve this. Like someone has probably already figured this out before. And so I built a solution to a problem that I think only exists for me, which was I wanted a way to make sure I could beat my dad at Battleship 100% of the time. So I used a coding agent to essentially research an algorithm, like research the web to see, who here, like, is there anything out there, someone who's developed an algorithm for determining the probability and the ship placement that could then build a prediction model. So this is a screenshot of a web app that only runs on my computer. I have no plans on publishing it or releasing it to anyone. It's just something for me that shows me the next 5 most likely moves, and I can kind of inform it as the game goes on. So that is the kind of thing that, in the old days, it could have taken me a very long time to put together and probably would have been very satisfying. And I think for the people who do like building these from scratch, I don't want to take away from it. But this piece of software that I have a screenshot of, I was able to put together in about 30 minutes, voice chatting to my computer while I was working on some other things. So this is just one kind of fun example of disposable software. We'll get into maybe a more work-related or tangible one after this, but before we get into that, I want to talk a little bit about the state of AI because there's a lot of talk about it, even hearing it from all of you in the room. And I want to share my perspective going into it in addition to this. So there's some headlines here that you've probably seen already if you're paying attention to the news at all. I try to avoid the news as much as possible, but it feels like it's pretty much impossible to avoid. The number one thing I see is that AI, from kind of like the powers that be, the biggest players in the space, are telling us that AI is like a productivity headset. Like it's basically going to be something that we all have to adopt that basically just takes whatever output expectations we had and supercharges it. If you're doing 5 emails today, you got to be doing 50. If you're closing 10 tickets, you need to be doing 100. And, the headlines are really not that positive, right? We've got AI job apocalypse. We don't love that. We got, Amazon cutting corporate jobs, fewer people doing some of the jobs. We don't like that either. And we see all this kind of talk about job replacement. That's the CEO of Anthropic, who has built Claude Code, an amazing developer tool. Um, all having these headlines that I think kind of boil down to the same concept, which is, how do we use AI to squeeze more out of the people we have or shrink down our team, which I don't think is the right way to think about what AI can unlock for us as individuals or for us as teams and businesses. And that's where, sharing my opinion on this, which is that, AI should not be something that just creates more busy work for us to do. It shouldn't be something that just, increases our expectations. It really should help us be better at doing our job and allow us to accomplish more, like I'd say higher quality things as a team. Are we able to have automated processes that make the software that we're shipping, more bug free? Are we able to, and we'll kind of get to this example in a little bit, have better outreach for maybe leads that we're reaching out to? Are there things that we all looked at and we're saying it'd be too ambitious to try and solve this problem the traditional way? Is there a way that we could use AI in our workflows to tackle a problem that maybe was too ambitious for us to consider doing? I think enabling our people to be better is the change that really is ultimately worth it. And I think that is the promise of AI rather than just, automating everything and replacing everyone. Continuing on, I want to talk a little bit about AI native companies. I think this is kind of like probably our number one buzzword of 2026 based on my anecdotal research. I think pretty much any company right now that's being invested in by YC or any older company that's trying to pivot is basically saying we're becoming AI native X. Um, but what does that really mean? I've kind of rebuilt and rethought of the workflows for my software development company to become AI native, but it was a lot more than just saying, okay, we're going to buy a .ai domain for our business, throw AI on, maybe our landing page and say we're an AI native company. Um, it means that when we're building things AI native, we build AI at the center. So we're not going to just like have an AI side product. We're not going to add a chat bot. We're really thinking about how does every single thing we do in the company have AI at the centerpiece of it. So it's less, buying a ChatGPT license, asking it to just draft an email. I mean, of course, all those things are great. But I think to really become truly AI native, you're thinking about how is the agent fully integrated into our workflow? It's prepared my schedule. It's triaged my tasks. It has questions for me that I need to answer to help me go through the workday. It's an AI that's not giving general advice, but it's trained on our SOPs, our workflows, our data, so that, every team member that is interacting with it is getting the same response and it's kind of all on brand. And that, when we're building workflows and we're talking about automating processes, we're thinking about AI at the center of them. So as part of being, an AI native organization, I think it also changes the way we can address software. And that leads me to my next point, which is that agentic AI and our favorite coding agents like Claude Code and Codex and everything else can actually be used for a lot more than coding. And this is a topic I was really excited to bring this group in particular, as a group of developers, is that, I'm sure a lot of people here, just even by the audience, are using agentic AI as part of their engineering pipeline, right? It's helping us build software. It's helping us evaluate it. It's helping us write code, automate deployments, I think was mentioned. So we even have some real examples of that bullets here. But agentic AI can also be for every single person in the organization. It can help us run workflows, automate repetitive tasks, and even solve novel problems that we don't have a SaaS product for, or maybe we don't have a solution for in-house. And that's kind of what we're going to focus on today. There have been some really great conversations in previous meetups about, how to use agentic AI just for like the engineering part of the engineering job. I'm not necessarily here today to reiterate that other than I reinforce that. Like, I think it's a great part of it. But really, what I want to focus on today is how can we use agentic AI for more than just coding? Because there's a lot more applications that we can bring into the picture. Um, and so this comes to the term disposable software or Kleenex for workflows. Um, as I mentioned, that kind of notion of like capital S sacred software. That stuff is really important. And that's, especially as developers, the core of what we work on day in and day out. And I'm not talking about replacing that or changing that or anything else like that. But what I want to introduce is this idea of disposable software or Kleenex, which is when we have a problem, can we change the way we think about solving that problem? When we have a, an issue that comes up, let's address it a little bit differently. So rather than trying to solve the problem by adapting into our existing code base, that has to kind of become part of our roadmap. We have to create tickets. It has to go through a production deployment pipeline. We can set that aside, right? We also can maybe set aside buying more SaaS products. This is a really common thing that comes up, especially for me, running a younger, smaller company. You have all these things that you want to manage, and then you say, okay, well, there's a SaaS product that solves exactly this problem. Maybe I'll subscribe to it. I don't think we need to do that as much either. Obviously, SaaS products still have their place, but I think this idea of, a problem comes up, do we live with the annoyance? Do we buy a tool? Do we try to fit it into a roadmap? I think we can set all of those aside and use AI to kind of build us these things that solve quick problems in a short amount of time. And that kind of leads me to my central thesis, which is that there are business problems that we can solve that impact any person at any level of the organization that anyone, technical or not, can solve in about 10 to 30 minutes, I would say. So, we're trying to solve the problems, but skipping the overhead, whether that's tech debt overhead, if we're building it ourselves, or licensing and seat costs if we're trying to find a product on the marketplace that maybe does what we want it to do. So we're looking at targeted solutions. You know, can we build something that addresses one specific problem, uses agentic coding to solve it, and then we use it for the problem we're trying to solve, throw it away? And we're about to head into a demo. Before that demo, I would just say I'm going to be switching out of Gamma. We're going to head over to VS Code. But as I show you kind of this building process for this scenario I've drafted to show all of you, I would say when we're thinking of disposable software, what we're looking for is not trying to build the perfect code for it necessarily. We're really trying to describe to the coding agent, here's the business outcome I'm trying to solve. Here is exactly what I want to see. And then we're going to iterate on it very quickly. And then we're also just going to see what we get. Because this is a live demo, I'm going to be showing you the repository I'm working within. And then we're going to work directly with the coding agent. And maybe it will work right away, maybe it won't. But that will be all right, because as soon as we start to slow down, in my opinion, to say, okay, how much of this or that do we need to do? I think that kind of takes away from this notion of building a solution to a short-term problem. And so last note I would say is that software should work for you and not the other way around. So the demo I'm about to get into is an environment that maybe, or a problem that maybe would face some of you or people that you work with. But we're going to be looking at a CSV from a recent conference we attended. This is all fictitious. And then I'm also going to show you how we put together a context folder for the agent to work with them. So it's going to be a little bit of information about our business. We're going to be using VS Code and Codex to kind of solve this problem. And then I'll also put together some stubs that will push this into our CRM. We'll probably not actually build that out all the way, but I want to show you that, when you build something like this, it can be useful, and then you can have it kind of plug into your more solid systems at the end of the day. So I'm about to dive into that. Before we go there, any questions on what we've talked about so far?
Question on such a simple example like this.
Yeah.
I mean, it's probably good just to practice and do it with coding, but you could also use I use Quad, you could create a skill, right? And just run it through the MCP there.
Yeah.
Do you ever have moments where you think, hey, should I just run it that way or versus code it myself?
Yeah. I would say skills can be big parts of these workflows. And I think that skills represent a workflow that you want to use multiple times. So in this case, if I'm dealing with a CSV from a conference of contacts I want to follow up on, I might use Codex to kind of build the solution and kind of iterate to say, okay, I want it to help me follow up with these leads that I have. And I might kind of trial and error that through the first build. But then if I find myself doing that again for the next conference, that's where I would turn it into the skill, because now I'm saying, okay, I've kind of validated, I like it going this way. Now let's turn it into a skill. Now I run the skill every time. And we could even tie the skills into even a bigger skill, like, hey, here's how we want to follow up with leads. And then here's a skill for managing the conferences. So to me, a skill is really just a workflow that we want to run multiple times. Not all things necessarily need to be skills if we're only going to run it once or twice, in my opinion.
Even if we're going to run it a lot of times, it seems like it's still an expensive way to run things. But so if you have a process that is repeatable, you could write an application, you could write code that runs on your system.
Yes.
You're not paying whoever for tokens or what.
That's true as well. And I think, there's that cost benefit analysis when you're building of what parts do we want the AI to help with? What parts is it a waste of tokens to solve? And, what parts can be turned into software? I actually think that, which I don't touch a lot on this conversation, so I think it's a worthy detour. When you're building quick solutions to problems, if you're I'll talk about our CRM. We built a CRM from scratch to handle our specific needs, and partially because we like building software. And so when I find myself building a workflow with AI and running it a lot of times, that to me on the product side is a flag that we should probably incorporate this into our roadmap. And so I think, if we think of like product-led growth, we have maybe some like workflow-led product a little bit, where if we find ourselves solving the same problem over and over and over again with AI, maybe we say, hey, this should be something that we put into our code base that can run without the AI supervising every step. Absolutely. All right, we can get into, oh yeah,
The one thing you said, like in step one, is like, don't describe the outcome, which I get, if that makes sense.
yeah,
Don't describe the how to code it.
yeah,
And at least with what I've done, I found it really helpful to give some guidelines of like, backend and fast API and write it in Python, because like that's stuff I understand. So then
yeah,
as it does it, and I usually run into problems, I can give it more specific, like, hey, can you fix this part, and can you do this so that it works? And
yeah.
so I'm curious if you think, do you do that sometimes, or what are your thoughts?
So I would say on the building like a web app or beyond, absolutely. That's a huge part of what I do. And I think, in fact, like a big part of, I would say, AI assisted development is kind of being that CTO or senior developer or whatever you want to call it, that's kind of instructing or guiding the agent to the outcome or to the pathway that fits into the technology architecture as a whole. So I think that's really important. I think that for problems like this that we're going to look at, you probably could be a little bit of stack agnostic. Maybe Python is helpful because you're saying like, hey, I have a lot of experience in Python. I'm going to run it here. But what I'm going to show you is running this local in my repository, and we're not going to connect it to a database. There's no need to really. It's all going to be using the coding agent to solve the problems with just inside its environment, which I think wouldn't work if we were trying to build it into a PR as part of a bigger project. But if we're just trying to follow up with some leads at a conference, it actually, I mean, you can do that, but I don't think you need to.
I think your point is like, for the stuff that's more disposable, like more like type purpose.
Yeah.
Don't worry about it.
Then don't worry about it. But absolutely, as soon as it extends beyond disposable, like as soon as we are keeping the software, I'd say that's absolutely critical to guide it. Anyone else? All right, we'll continue. Let me see. Just want to make sure this is still screen sharing to Zoom as well. Okay, awesome. Let me just pull this up. Okay, so how is this looking? I'm gonna maybe zoom in a tiny bit here. Okay, so this is my sample repository. All this information is totally fake. But you see here, it's just a really simple folder. I have a couple markdown files. So imagine me, right? Let me go in here. Okay, we're a small software development agency. That part is real, and we are based in Portland, Oregon. So this first line is pretty much real, but everything else is kind of just made up for the purpose of the demo. So in this fictitious example, we went to, we build custom software for people. We have a team. Here's some 3 fictitious members. Here's our ideal customer. In this scenario, we just went to a conference. And if any of you have been to a conference before, depending on the conference, sometimes you'll get a lead list, or sometimes, depending on how tech enabled this is, if you did one-on-ones, they'll give you like a report of people that you met with or came to your booth or anything like that. It's great when you get that right away. Speaking from experience, it doesn't always turn out super nice. But for this fictitious company, conferences matter for us a lot. We're a relationship business. We want to make introductions. And so we put together as a company a little CSV, or we were given one, of all the people we talked to. So that also exists here in my repository. Basically just some light and incomplete information. So if you look at this, we've got our name, company, email, phone, role, notes, and met at. So if you just scan this data, you'll notice not all of the data is populated. Some things are missing data, like here we don't have a name, and it's all very shorthand. So in this scenario, we went to this conference. We have a list of contacts that we're interested in. We also have a little bit of notes from the event itself. So imagine these maybe were notes that were in the Notes app because you're at your booth. Sarah Chen comes up and says, "Hey, I am really interested. We have an internal intake form that we have to rekey into 3 different systems. This could help us out." And they want a proposal. So I've kind of built this repository simulating what the end of a conference could be. And the problem statement I'm going to walk us through that I think would be a really good candidate for disposable software, which would be rather than trying to build a robust solution that automates this for all of time, I'm just going to use the coding agent to help me build this just for now to help me follow up with the leads. There's also some notes here, and I can get into like the context of why, but just some context about the conference itself, because all of this is going to be valuable information for the agent to help us on these follow-ups. And then I also have a sheet here of some of our offerings, because one of the things that I want to do with my lead list is I want to say, okay, who here do I want to follow up with, and what would that follow up entail? So those are all these context files, and then I have a little bit of a README, just a little bit too about the demo that it is we're doing here. Any questions on this repository so far before I jump into building it? Okay, cool. So the way I might approach this problem is I have Codex here installed on the side of VS Code, and I'm going to say something to the effect of, and we'll probably for the sake of speed, work on GPT 5.5 extra fast with medium reasoning. But I'll say, help me build a local tracker to follow up this conference. So, I don't know, it's kind of small, but basically what I'm instructing the agent here as I kick it off is I'm saying, help me build a tracker to follow up on leads from this conference. I want them organized based on priority and a recommended follow-up product from our offer sheet. So again, totally not doing what I would take traditional software engineering here at all. We're doing something a little bit different by having the agent, it's still writing code, but we're instead directing it towards trying to solve the outcome of the problem that I have here, which in this case is lead follow-up. I'll get into some more examples outside of this demo towards the end of the presentation. But you can see here, it uses the repository as kind of like its context to solve this problem. And the advantage of using this with a coding agent, as opposed to, say, the ChatGPT web application, is that the amount of resources it can pull in and build is way more than just interacting with, a ChatGPT web product or a Claude web product. What it's doing is it's treating all this information about my business and my leads that I want to follow up with as a code base. And so you can kind of see its reasoning here shared through in the side panel. It's looking at the CSV and it's trying to infer a data model. It says, okay, the CSV has enough signal to infer priority. There isn't an existing app scaffold here. So now it's looking at this repository and realizing, hey, this person who spun up this coding agent has there's no software this is connected to. They're just trying to build a local tracker. So it's going to settle in on a HTML file, it looks like. And you can see here, it's kind of running through and processing this. So this part will take a minute to do as it's generating the software. Each time you do this, in preparation, I'd say as a spoiler alert, I did run this before on a totally separate repository to see if it would work. But each time you're running a coding agent, you're never really sure how things are going to turn out. So it's going to do its best bet to solve the problem I asked it. And so, yeah, we'll get a little question here. Do we want to start a local static web server for the lead tracker? Sure, let's try it out. Let's see what it's got for me here. And let's see what it will decide to do next. But the idea is we're trying to move with getting it started, get that first version in front of us and say, okay, is this solution going to solve the problem that I have, or do I need to refine it? And that's where that kind of iterate quickly mindset will help us a lot. So we'll see what it comes with now. Yep. I think it is in a sandboxed environment right now, so it's going to be a little bit there we go. It's going to be a little bit restricted in what it could do, but yeah, we'll let that run for a moment, and we'll see what it comes up with.
Did you specify what stack to use or?
No, it's just going to, I think, it'll kind of infer a little bit because I said, I did say like a local tracker. The reason why I specified local tracker up at the top was so that it would kind of pin down and not ask as many questions. If you took that out, it would probably ask you some questions a little bit to see, let's see here. It would probably ask you like, hey, are you building this as a web app? Are you wanting to build this into a production application? And then, maybe it would walk you through it. But in this case, we're just going like pretty pure. I don't know if we go Codex browser. Let's see. So here is the lead tracker. This was built from the CSV. And you can see here, it took the data I have and kind of built like a mini follow-up tracker. This could be something that, again, I'm sitting down, I'm trying to follow up with this conference. I'd say, okay, great. Now I can see here's who I need to follow up with the most from that data. We got Mike, Jennifer, Isabel, and so on. These are all fake people. One of the things that would be really helpful is if these are real people, we could also set the coding agent to do research into these people to craft it better. But you can see it looked at all of our, all the information we had, it pulled it in. It said, okay, from the, product list, let's do AI feature integration. And our next action is send a demo scheduling email. All of this data, if we look, will match with what we have in the repository here. But following this notion of building quickly, I can look at this and say, okay, this is my starting point. This is kind of helpful. I can see, okay, here's some information. It kind of inferred what maybe the recommended product would be. Next action. I could say something like, let's go with, please draft an email for each hot lead and add it to the interface. So I'm just gonna do a little voice chat there. But this would be a natural thing for me. When I would see this list, I'd say, okay, I've got these hot leads. Well, the coding agent can do more than just write the software on the page. It's an AI model and it has a lot of generalized knowledge. And not only does it have generalized knowledge, it also knows about me. It knows about what we offer. It knows everything that I give it access to. And so I can give it this follow on to say, okay, draft an email for each person. And so I'm not just like building something once and saying, okay, this looks good. And I'm also not just, trying to automate. I'm really using the AI to kind of inform the interface, but then also do work that only an AI could do. For example, drafting an email based on the exact way that we want it to produce and combining the two into a piece of software that really helps me follow up. And so you can see here, it's just kind of drafting those together and we'll just let it go.
Question while I was thinking.
Yep.
How easy is it in this environment to like plug in other tools? Do you have either easy way to do like auth into other, because it'd be nice if you could just have it one shot. Hey, take this list, prioritize it.
Yeah.
Write the emails. Yeah.
Yeah, it's extremely easy. I'm using VS Code here with the Codex integration because I like, having an easy way to kind of show the repository. Um, Whether you're using the Codex app itself, which I can get into in a minute, or you build another solution of your own, it's very easy to connect this step here. So we'll say the emails, give this a refresh. So I think it redeployed. Oh yeah, this interface is not very good, but it tried its best. This is what we get for using medium thinking instead of extra high thinking. But you can see here, it wrote these emails. I didn't give it anything about like how I'd like to write emails or how to do it in my voice, but that's pretty straightforward to do. But it would be very easy. And like talking about doing this in practice, I have, my Gmail account scopes configured to draft. So if I was actually following through this example, I would instruct it to not just draft them into the interface, but I would say add a button that writes it to my Gmail drafts or something like that. Very easy to connect it. Or say this was an industry conference and we already knew and were discussing a lot of people, I would maybe connect in Slack so that, we have the context from Slack and maybe some discussions that have been going on there. So the more context you can give it, the better. And connecting additional things is very easy to do.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
I know you've done this same kind of scenario multiple times. Does it come up with like save implementation time and time and the user interface, other things like that? How much variation do you see?
There's a lot of variation. Surprisingly, I think part of it is because I put in these like simple, very vague prompts. But to prep, I've run this twice, and each time the interface looks totally different. And so, and also what it decides to emphasize looks a little bit different too. These cards here are, I would say, relatively consistent. This time is interesting to have each like user be a card. Most of the time, or I should say the other two times, it had it more as like a table to kind of mimic the spreadsheet. But there's definitely some variation when you're throwing things together at this speed. Yep.
Are you tracking the amount of tokens that it took to make this?
No, I'm not, but I could, but I didn't. I'd say probably pretty limited, just given that it has a pretty small repository here and we're at maybe 2,000 lines of code, I think, to put this together. But yeah, and so I would say, but yes, connecting this to other things, the email drafts, for example, for me would be something that'd be really helpful. But this is, really a new way of, I would say, thinking about problems. We could say, research these people, plot their companies on a map, connect this to, if we are a larger company, connect this to our team information. Who is geographically the closest of our sales reps who could pop in for a visit? Those kinds of things all become really possible and really accessible. And this piece of software that's running, on a local port on my computer really is kind of meaningless. It's ephemeral. But the thing that I would say here, and that's kind of where I have this export JSON button, agency OS summary, is that if you think of this kind of ephemeral software as just a spoke off of your core, if you're using Salesforce for your CRM, or if you've built your own, like I have in my case, or if you're using HubSpot or anything else, you can end every single one of these workflows with, okay, now connect it to blank, 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 connect it to HubSpot, and update the information in there. So you're using this AI. It's extremely inexpensive to run. Like I said, I don't know the exact number of tokens, but a fraction of a fraction of a daily allotment of a Codex subscription goes into building something like this. It's going to be cheaper than any other company that's selling you their AI add-on features to run it because you're essentially using your Codex subscription. And then you can have it update your source of truth for your company, which is kind of your more permanent software. In this case, it would be the CRM. Once all these emails have been sent, I could then instruct the agent here. I could say, okay, great. now export all of this data into HubSpot using XYZ integration. And obviously I haven't scoped that. I don't have a HubSpot account, but if I ran that command, it could then take all the data, update it in there. And I have this kind of local AI powered workflow that's using all the context, but we're not this company that has a billion different apps and data starting to live in all these different places. We make it a point of emphasis that at the end of one of these workflows, we update the kind of core system. So that would be the thought process. This is an example. We did it faster than 20 minutes to build this thing. So, yep, that's a little time check. So I have succeeded in that regard of accomplishing what I set out to do from the title. But are there any questions on this demo, or is there even anything you'd like to see added or changed on this tracker that we could take a look at in this environment?
I see, I see kind of relatively simple uses that I've implemented, it's kind of agentic, so not really disposable, but first kind of single transaction, but not really chain transaction. Have you done anything with that in terms of longer workflows across diverse?
Yes. I would say it probably gets outside of the realm of disposable software, but I would say that absolutely having codecs or any sort of coding agent be a part of a longer chain of workflows can be really helpful. I would say one example that comes to mind is in communication triage. A lot of tickets that come in now spin up a coding agent to look at, 'cause, a software agency, so I manage a lot of client accounts and a lot of individual projects, all with their own code bases. So if we get a request coming in from a user about a bug, for example, that kind of kicks off a workflow of researching the context on that client from past communications, researching the project details itself, and looking at the code base, maybe spinning up a browser automation to validate the issue and kind of really trying to triage it down. That is one, I would say, more complex workflow that really helps us go from, bug or feedback reported to human in the loop decision point to decide, okay, it's not just, oh, I got this email, I have to remember what we're going to do with it. It's really, I got this email. The agents behind the scenes have looked at the contracts, the, the GitHub. And it looks at everything, the repository to say, okay, when they're reporting this issue, this is an in-scope fix. Here's the recommended pathway. Do you approve of sending a coding agent to go out and try to address this? Or do you want to assign it to the team to work on later? That kind of thing. So that'll be one example of that. And I definitely think that the agents that we have access to now, either via API or through a harness, are definitely powerful enough to be helpful in those areas without causing like hallucinations or things like that.
You talk about the difference between agent and workflow. So I feel like those get conflated a lot. And what I've heard is more agent is like there's more latitude for an agent to do something, whereas a lot of times folks use AI agent as a term, but it's actually just a built workflow that incorporates an LLM at some point.
Yeah. Yeah, that's kind of a pet peeve of mine is like, how do we name things correctly? And I do feel like the word agent, especially in media, gets like overused. To me, I feel like I should probably just Google like a dictionary definition, but the way I would define an agent is when you're giving an LLM tool a couple of key capabilities. The first is the ability to connect into other sources, so it can call tools and run functions. And then the second thing you're doing to really invoke an agent is you're giving it the latitude to call itself recursively until an objective is met. And so if I, make an API request to an OpenAI endpoint and I say, come up with 10 names for my new dog, and I send that data blob and I receive information back, that's to your point, kind of a workflow. I'm sending in data, I'm expecting data out. When I'm spinning up an agent, kind of in this conversation here, even though this interface is chat, and by the way, this interface, could be chat, but you could also be doing this via API as well. But when I'm setting this here, you see it shows you this amount of time it worked, 4 minutes, 5 seconds, because what we've done is we've given it a goal and it's going to work basically a certain amount. It's going to work an unlimited number of times, calling itself in succession until it believes the problem solved or I run out of API credits.
Agents using code.
Yeah.
How we can build the chain that invoke that.
Yeah. So I would say how you want to build it depends on where the workflow is going to live. So if the workflow is being started on someone's local computer, like for example, like this example that I'm showing you here, where I have these documents, I put them in a folder, and I'm saying, all right, Codex, help me solve this problem. A local environment is great to queue up those agents. And I could take this process and turn it into a skill with the skill builder capability, and then I could run it again for the next conference I go to. The reason why I'd be doing it this way is because this is kind of a human-led and human-initiated project, right? Like if I close my computer, it's going to stop. If I open my computer, go to a new conference, it's going to run again. That's one entry point. If this workflow, though, is cloud-based, one way you could invoke the Codex agents is through the OpenAI API. And so they expose, I believe right now, 5.3 Codex, which is a 0.2 model degrade, but it is accessible via API. And we plug this into a lot of the software we build. And so that allows you to invoke the agents from the cloud and really be just an API request that's fed with the context and tools to interact with your data. And that could really work anywhere. You know, you could have a machine running it. It could be part of a function. You know, there's really no limit to where those could be set up.
Without API, yeah. Forgot to mention that without API, I have VS Code. Can I create multiple agents and they can talk with each other?
Yeah, absolutely. You can. So here I'm using VS Code. I have the Codex extension installed here in my sidebar. And that is included with any chat GPT subscription. So essentially, I just logged into my account and that validated the credentials and gives me the access to run it here. So I'm using the extension. You could also use it from the terminal. So you could also, you know, open an instance, run it, and then have that agent running out of VS Code using your ChatGPT subscription.
You mentioned it'll run until it finds a solution or runs out of tokens.
Yes.
And Sean might remember I asked him this question when he did his presentation. Is there some sort of middle ground, some place where the AI just gives up and says, no, I'm not good enough to solve this?
I would say yes. It does. They actually released a new slash command. They as in Codex, and I think actually Claude did too, kind of simultaneously, where you can set a goal and then give it a token budget to run through. And then it will really push to like find a solution. But if you gave it something really abstract, you might find it works for about like 45 minutes and then probably stops. If it's something that's like totally impossible, it will push back. I'm definitely a tinkerer and I kind of like messing with things. So sometimes I will give Codex like a very hard slash impossible problem just to see if it can figure it out. And you know, if it's out of the realm of possibilities, maybe it'll try to gaslight you into thinking it, but most of the time it will. I also include it kind of like, and you know, in my README file here, a lot of people do this. I don't have it here, but I could say, you know, please do like research the technical implementation first, push back if I'm asking for something that would be impossible to build given the frameworks that we're already using. Those kinds of things will also help it push back without, you know, really trying to go to the ends of the earth to solve your problem. Anyone else? Or I can continue the presentation.
I mean, let's say, for instance, you're handling with CSV file, right?
Yeah.
And there could be a human error or some kind of error. So for instance, you have an email that you're sending to them, and for instance, the email ID is wrong. How would agent would show us, like, when you're sending an email, draft email to the person.
Yeah.
Let's say the email is wrong, how will it happen?
This is actually a really great part of AI and workflow. So I'm glad you brought this up, this notion of if the data is wrong, can the AI help us move forward with that? And I actually think this is like probably one of the best use cases of AI in terms of business workflows is that because this knowledge is generalized, it can spot errors and things like that. In my CSV, there's a couple things that are missing. Um, like this person doesn't have a name because it's a different one there. But, you could do something like, I'm trying to see if we've got um, an example in this spreadsheet, but it's really good at kind of like drawing the lines together. So like, for example, in this CSV, we've got Valentina Rossi, and then from Fabricam Inc. right here. So if I were to do something like delete their first name, right? Say something got messed up or if I mistyped it, but you could see it's still there in the email address. And AI is actually really good. Typically, I'm going to do it, so we'll see if it works. So maybe it'll just make me look silly. But typically, AI is very good at kind of closing the gaps in understanding and unifying some of those data. So if someone inputs data in a form and the email, it says like .con and then the email errors out, the AI probably will correct it. Or if it tries to send it and then it fails and then it notices it fails, if it has access to that information, it will say, oh, you did .con instead of .com. Let's try again. Or, we looked up their domain. Their domain is actually tailspintoys.org. That's why .com didn't resolve. So I think it can actually
The
be,
correction happen from the agent side or the human side?
I think the agent side.
Agent side.
Yeah,
The
very,
agent itself will
Mhm.
correct the from con to com and then.
Yeah, I would say so. Like in this case, I'll just ask it here. Valentina's, oops, can't spoil it here. Fabricam's full contact information. We'll just ask it and see what comes up. But we'll see what it can put together. And it's going to look. But I would say that if you give an AI tool access to the internet, your data, and then the ability to kind of work on it for a bit, it will solve a lot of that. And actually, you can see it here. It, spotted the gap in the CSV of deleting Valentina and filled that in there. So we have that information for us as an example. Any other questions? Yeah.
Besides like CSV files, could you potentially also like share with other kinds of, or like use other kinds of media, like images or video or anything
Yeah.
similar kind of stuff?
I would say videos can be a little bit challenging just from like personal experience, like extracting the data that you want from the videos. What I'd probably like to do is I'd probably try to figure out a way to transcribe it and then try to get the audio transcribed and then use that as text. The LLMs are text and image based, but it will definitely use them. And there's really no limits to the type of media that you could use or other data sources. This is kind of a sandbox environment connected to nothing. But a big part of when I'm doing this, like quote unquote for real, is that I have it connected to our CRM and our email and our Slack channels so that all that context is available when needed to inform some of the things that we're doing.
Let's say in the CSV file, you do all the cleanup and you have sent in
Yeah,
whatever the task it's supposed to do. And let's say in the CSV file, you have another column, like the last column, say the status, like is it failed or passed that particular row. Can the agent again update the CSV with the status of failed or success?
absolutely. Yeah, you could use the CSV in this case as kind of like a pseudo database if you wanted to. Yeah, that would be no problem. You could
don't
even,
want to go
yeah.
to the application and see it's just that, okay, you want to use the same report. Maybe it will move it to a different place. so that you can go there and, okay, is it done or not?
Yeah.
Rather than like checking everything else, if you check your own CSV file to know if any manual intervention needed, if it's failed, success means okay, good.
Yes, absolutely. You could definitely have it update the CSV with any of that information. And if you think of the AI as kind of like being able to connect to a lot of different things, for some more, longer facing tasks that maybe do take 30, 45 minutes, you can also connect it to notification services that you might use. Like, for example, I have a Telegram bot that I set up, that's a connection between Codex and me. So I can have it send me a message, and reach me, when I'm on the go saying, hey, the job completed, because maybe I've stepped away from my computer, because it's been, running for 35 minutes and I wanted to go do something else.
The agents that you build are more like attended or unattended?
I would say in the products we build, unattended, but then I would say like in day-to-day work, I do a lot of work in conjunction with the supervised agents where we say, okay, here's what we're trying to do. Maybe we have a bunch of emails we need to get through, maybe a proposal that we want to evaluate, things like that. Yeah. Pretty healthy mix. Yeah.
And how long would you be working with this specific agent before you're time to initialize a new?
It depends, which is not a super fun answer. I would say if I was satisfied with what was produced over here, I would, keep chatting with it until I wasn't satisfied. But I will definitely restart an agent if I feel like important context is being lost, or sometimes it's getting less and less frequent, but sometimes agents will kind of go down a rabbit hole of just like it's not really being that helpful anymore. And maybe for both our sakes, it's better to just close that chat and start a new one. So I would say it's definitely feeling based more than like a set threshold. I've had some conversations that have gone really well, for a long period of time, and I've had some that were immediately not really working that well, and we need to stop. That contrast with development, where I would say like with development, I really try to stay disciplined about, like one feature, one component, like very like siloed chat work streams, for the most part, because we're working on a larger code base. Yep.
Earlier you mentioned this ideal of AI being used to do higher quality work as opposed to just more quantity of
Mhm.
work. Could you describe like your thinking behind that, how you go about thinking that applies, or give some like examples of that?
Yeah. So let me think of a good example of higher quality. I'd say a really easy example is that the quality of solutions we've been able to deliver, has been has been higher with AI as kind of our companion in building. But I feel like that kind of veers too much into development territory. It's like, oh, the coding agents help us code better. In terms of like value delivery, one thing that I offer, for startup founders is a product strategy session. And so this is a way for prospective entrepreneurs to kind of validate their idea. I've built and launched a lot of products, and we use this session. It's about 2 hours to really work together on their idea so that they can have a blueprint to go build their MVP or work with us to build their MVP or whatever the case may be. One thing that allows us to do kind of at a higher quality is having these agents. I'll have kind of a intro call with the person that we're talking to about this. It'll be 30 minutes where I try to understand their idea, see if this is a good recommendation for that 2 hour strategy session. At the end of that session, I have research agents that go and really kind of give me a good idea of the market they're trying to enter if I don't have that much experience about it. Build a tailored, book, kind of like follow, or a workbook following kind of our best practices and philosophies, but tailored to their idea and the stage they're at and the type of product they're trying to build, that then we can send them as prep work for the strategy session. So what we've done is we've taken something that, really required like, I would say, we could really only go into like a surface level, with our old version of that offering. Now we've been able to go to a much deeper level and really have like a tailored solution where, we have a lot more context about the other solutions on the market, the things they're trying to solve, and so on. So a lot of, I would say, data enrichment that like makes my job in that 2 hours a lot more valuable. And we're able to talk about like higher leverage items than, kind of maybe some of the things that we used to talk about, like tell me more about the market. And then, we have to kind of go through that process together.
What standards or practices you follow when you give instructions to any AI?
I would say a big one would be thinking about the outcome that I'm trying to achieve. These AI systems will kind of do what you ask for better or for worse. So I really think about before I set off on any sort of AI adventure, I think about what am I really trying to get it to do, and how would I describe that? And so, even though in this kind of example I showed you kind of flippantly, I'm just chatting something and throwing it in there. I do try to be really thoughtful to say, okay, if I'm having this agent help us prioritize feedback from a big list of feedback that we got from users, I really think about, well, what do I want? Do I want a list sorted by priority? Do I want a list of things that are in scope versus out of scope? Do I want to build a roadmap that I can show the other engineers on my team that we can work from? So it's like, what is the outcome that I'm trying to achieve? That's kind of the practice I put into prompting. There's some other things too that I would advise, like, running sandboxed sessions and keeping your files, in folders with the relevant context. Not just ignoring all of those warnings that I was ignoring for the purpose of this demo, but really thinking, what tools does this agent need to have access to? Does it have the right scopes of permissions for those? And so on would be the other elements of standards.
Have you seen any value of AI running at longer time horizons on things where maybe you're saying, hey, go find problems that I don't know if I haven't. Like just go kind of poke around for a while, like kind of almost a bordering on an open claw or something, but just, like, hey, like where can we expand this more? Where can proactively kind of learn about us, build out context, try to figure out things that maybe we aren't sure we need to figure out yet.
Yeah,
Beyond the capacity of most constructs, have you played with those kinds of boundaries?
I definitely have tried to push on those boundaries. In all, I'm really interested, even before these coding agents were out. As soon as they added like the thinking capability to any of these chat models, I was always curious, like, how long can I get it to think about something? Like what could I do to like really just like push it? And then would that end result be valuable? So I'd come up with like really complicated like word problems to see if it could figure it out. As far as pushing those things, I think that the the having it think longer for a solution when it comes to more open-ended things like what problems do I not know? What's the best way to grow my business? I haven't found a ton of benefit from that. I really think about where the longer time horizon comes in is I've connected it to more resources to come up with like a more specialized solution. So like, for example, a really big thing for me is like web research. Some of these coding agents have web research already built into their tool sets, which is great, but somewhat limited. And so, for example, I have a Perplexity and a Firecrawl account that the agent has access to use to scrape data from the internet to really not just get like little bits of information that OpenAI wants me to have, but I'm like, no, please go download the whole web page of these sites and pull all that in and have that, inform whatever it is we're trying to do, like if it's market research. And that does take a while because now it's invoking API calls, it's then processing that data and rolling it up. That might take 30, 45 minutes. Those results do prove to be valuable. As in contrast to, oh, it just thought about this open-ended problem, kind of self like navel gazing almost, like if the AI is doing that, I don't think it's gonna be that valuable. But if it's connecting to more services, then I do think it will be valuable.
Would you almost say it's like a really good IC? Like it's not a director yet, where it can kind of develop strategic objectives and go after them, but it's a good individual contributor where you can go, hey, here's what I'm trying to do. Here's a few tools, like go and figure it out.
Yeah.
Let me give you feedback, but we haven't really evolved beyond that.
Yeah, it would be a really fun experiment to give the AI kind of the driver's seat in leading the charge with the things that are available now. Because you're right, I use these agents kind of like I'm a manager, and then I have like a bazillion ICs that I am managing for tasks. Um, when GPT 3.5 no, 3 API. So 3.5 API hadn't been out yet. When GPT 3 API came out, for a hackathon, I thought it would be a fun concept to have every single software decision that I was going to make on building the product myself. I didn't have it code the product because it was too bad at it at the time. But I said every single product decision I'm going to outsource to the AI. And it's just like it's going to decide everything for this like to-do list tracker. And it was like pretty bland, like it was like a very mid to-do tracker. It was like it was like D&D themed tracker, which was kind of fun, but like it was just so middle of the road that it was pretty boring. But I was like, I'm just gonna like it's gonna design the color scheme, it's gonna design everything. I'm just gonna be the developer hands.
Can
That
I ask a
yeah,
specific question on that?
please.
Did it come up with a feature that wouldn't have thought of or like reached out to some other domain, got a feature and bring it into?
Yeah, it did. It got like pretty the idea just for the idea was like this to-do list tracker where like you pick an RPG archetype. So like maybe you're a warrior or you're a wizard or you're a rogue, and then it like helps you find self-improvement tasks related to that archetype. So like a warrior would be like going to the gym, magic would be reading a book. It's not a very good idea, but it was like kind of fun to make. Um, and the AI like designed like a very complex like experience point system that would just like totally miss the mark. But this was a long, in AI terms at least, a long time ago. So I'd be curious to run that kind of experiment again with building a business and say, you are the director, I'm the individual contributor, you tell me what to do. But my hunch would be that'd be kind of hard to even do as a mental exercise to be like, I'm gonna do what the AI says rather than, you know, do it myself.
Really, closing the loop is, it's the director and it's the implementer.
Yeah. Yeah.
Kind of the sequence that I found that is much more satisfactory than saying, go write me an application. It's like, go write me the specs for the application, and we're gonna agree on the specs,
Yeah.
and then take those specs and go write the application.
Yes. I would say I like that flow a lot. I would say for building any kind of like software that is going to last, um, I like that model. Like I would say that's like critical to building. Like I would not kind of invoke this method for building any sort of like meaningful piece of software. Um, I'm a big fan of like plan mode and planning all those things out. I don't do it as much for this stuff though. Sometimes, but because these are almost more like agentic workflow oriented than really software, it's almost like the software is like in the backseat to enabling the AI in this instance. But with that methodology, I definitely agree with it and use it all the time in my, we'll say like real development that I do.
One thing, we need to make any assumptions, like 2 months ago, the agent did one thing, and now it does something different, like, I found that I constantly have to evolve my thinking, like.
Yeah.
A couple months ago, I was using superpowers for Claude, which sets the spec and the plan, and then lets it go off and run parallel. Now the new model's out, and you don't really need that skill anymore.
Yeah. I would say, um, yeah, superpowers, I think like G Stack, there's all these like public repositories of skill sets that people put together. And I think those can be valuable. I also do think sometimes those things are adding icing onto what ultimately at the end of the day is a really smart AI system. And I think there's a little bit of something too to people being like, I am kind of in control of the AI and I've kind of like carved out my own corner of the world by like I know like the prompt secret sauce to like make the AI do things that other people can't do. There's a lot of that, especially on social media. Um, I would say my findings is that the AI is pretty smart no matter what you give it and like how well you prompt it. There's definitely things, right? Like, and it's hard to fully articulate, but I remember at a hackathon I was at not too long ago, there were some people who spent a lot of time setting up their development environment, and there's nothing wrong with that, and they like probably built better things, but like I was like, hey, we have a 3 hour deadline. I'm just gonna get straight into building it. And, I had a super working product at the end of the day with very little secret sauce added to it,
Found that a lot of skills really cool, and then I'm like, I think this is more detrimental to have the skill than it's just let the agent do its thing.
Yeah.
And that's becoming even more of a thing as these models mature. It's just like you need less and less of these kind of third party skills.
I agree. I think it totally gets in the way. And I'm sure some of you, at least, there's a lot of things being perpetrated and like memes and so on of like, act like you're the smartest developer in the world and like fix my bugs. And it's just like, it doesn't really work that way. Um, Even, yeah.
Like example, Netflix has thousands of skills and they just ran an audit and we had like 2,000 of them were like duplicates. Just people doing the same damn thing, right?
Yeah. I didn't know about that, but I'm not surprised. I mean, yeah, I build skills, but then I really say like the mark of like a good skill is that I'm using it 30 days later. And like a lot of times I build a skill and then I'm like, well, this doesn't really reproduce the way I would have liked it and kind of goes in the dustbin. So yeah, that is true. Let's see. I'll go. We're talking about this a little bit, but just one item I wanted to share with you all is that coding agents really we can do everything with. Just kind of as we wrap up on this topic, I showed you guys a little bit about managing leads, but researching leads, screening applications, all of these things, the coding agent will be able to help with. And you can do fun things with it too. Like a coding agent can really help you plan the perfect vacation, figure out where to live, analyze all of that stuff because it is so generalizable. And working in a repository gives it the ability to work for a very long time. These agentic tools, I don't think should be just limited to development work and developers. We really should think about all the problems we're trying to solve and spin it up there. So, yeah, I just wanted to bring up this slide. This would be one thing that that felt like is kind of topical to what we're talking about here. In terms of recommended stack, I definitely feel like your Codex and Cloud Code plugged into your IDE is a good way to go. Kind of I showed you here, especially if that's where you're familiar and comfortable working. But if you are a non-technical user or you're trying to share the benefits with this to your non-technical colleagues, I definitely recommend pointing them in the direction of Claude Cowork. This is something I have a lot of experience implementing, which I would even, like helping set up for, non-technical people in my life where they see something like an IDE, they feel very intimidated. They see the design of something like Codex and they're like, this is not for me. I'm not a developer. Um, Pointing your teammates in the direction of Claude Cowork can be very helpful because it does a lot of these same agentic capabilities, but it wraps it in a sandbox that runs on their computer and has all the connectors for the things that you'd want, like Microsoft 365, Slack, Google Workspace, et cetera, but makes it in a very easy to manage permissioned environment so that non-technical people cannot be intimidated by it. And you're not having to, tell someone how to use source control. You're just having them download an application. So, I know this is a pretty technical crowd, but I would definitely, think about spreading the good news to the non-technical people in your life or in your work because they will benefit from this too. And who knows, maybe they'll bug you about less tech related questions, but probably bug you with some more, to be honest. So they're like, wait, I built this amazing dashboard. Can we merge it into production? Like, no, that is forbidden. One other item I wanted to talk about too is this notion of a company brain. So kind of like what you were saying with the skills, I feel like every single developer I talk to is kind of building out their own workflows and their own ways that they like doing it. This is something I'd really think about if you're looking at bringing like agentic capabilities into your team is like, how are we centralizing this knowledge? Something that's been a really big effort of mine over the last couple of months, which is not kind of having everyone work in their own little pod or like silo being like, this is how I do AI workflows. But, can we centralize some of these things into one way? So, if we're doing client communications, if we're doing, document generation, if we're doing code review, if we can document that all in one central place that all of our agents have access to, that can help us have a little bit more uniform results. But I don't know. To be honest, I think it's one of those things that a lot of people are trying to do. I think we probably will need the AI to be a little bit smarter for this to be fully actualized. And it'll also require a lot of discipline for us to do it as a team instead of building all of our stuff individually. Yeah.
Good question. In what way would the AI need to be smarter? Where do the frontier models need to go to be this better?
I think there's something about maybe like the cause and effect element with the frontier models that I'd like to see improved before I feel like the dream people have for like a company brain that's always evolving to be actualized. An example of that would be I asked a AI to rate a proposal on a scale of 1 to 10, like whether or not we should move forward or not. And it was like a 7 out of 10. And then I said, okay, what changes would you make to make it a 10 out of 10? And then it said, okay, based on these parameters, I'd make these changes and that would make it a 10 out of 10. If I rerun it through the same workflow, it does not hit 10 out of 10. It hits like 7.5 out of 10. It hits 8 out of 10. And I've actually set up some instances that will run that infinitely until I run out of money across models and everything like that. Like budgeted, and I've spent $25, just improving. And what happens is the AI basically gives more and more feedback to itself. It's like, okay, this is still not a 10 out of 10. Here's the things you should change. And then it will apply those changes. And then you rerun it through the same prompt without all that context. If you gave it the conversation thread, it would say, oh, you did the changes I asked for. It's a 10 out of 10. But if you take out that context and you just say, just evaluate it based on these same standards, it won't get to the 10 out of 10 for anything that's subjective, or I should say it rarely will. It'll just be stuck in this loop of like trying to refine itself because it doesn't really know what the change would be that would achieve the outcome that it would want, and it would guess. And you kind of see that with software development too, where it's like you'll set a target for it and it will do its best guess. And now it's getting a little bit smarter because it will do things like open playwright and it will view the changes that it made and it'll say this looks good. But there's something about this notion of like, can the AI really figure out what change it needs to make in order to achieve the goal? I don't think it can. And that's the reasoning I'd like to see it have.
Flip the question along these lines, but has the AI ever come back and said, I'll change my scale, so now it's a 10?
I didn't give it permission to do that. The way that I had set it up is I said, here's this prompt. You're advising this user, rate the proposal with all the terms and conditions on a scale of 1 to 10, and then provide targeted feedback on how to improve it to a 10 out of 10. So that was like the core prompt. And then the proposal document was fed to it, and then it would output the score and then the feedback. And what I did is I basically saved that prompt as kind of like the start point. And then I fed it to 3 models in parallel. And then I basically just set it on a loop, like apply the feedback changes using, codecs, and then resubmit it. And then it would go and it would never hit to 10 out of 10.
Is as it does at one time, it changes its own internal model. So when it comes back again, it's a new judgment system.
It's like when you give it the parameters, judge this on a scale of 1 out of 10. The way that it was looking is that it didn't really have a way, I think, where it knew what it took to get to a 10 on its own. Even if you gave it the prompt that was evaluating it, it's like it doesn't understand its own reasoning. And so it can't like solve for itself when it's interacting with itself, is how I would describe it.
Because it had good models of 10, to compare to. Because I was doing a similar thing actually with grant application and,
Yeah.
These things get scored and, trying to improve the score, the hypothetical score of the grant application. And I think it was improving, it's all again hypothetical. You don't really know until the actual reviewer might review it, but there it had better models, I think, of grants, come kind of fit a standard
Yeah.
This, that, the other thing kind of requirement.
Well, in either case, did you ask it, how is it turning the subjective scale of 1 to 10 into objective statistics that it's then applying?
Yeah. Well, I mean,
It's the subjective or these objective measurements that are changing each time you run.
so in a real world production example where we had to ship a solution to this, it was evaluating job posts. Because we couldn't just say, refine the job till it gets to a 10 and then post it, because a lot of times it wouldn't get there, or if it did, it would get there as a 10, but who knows what that means. Where we did find success with AI is if we said, look for these 20 things, and then each AI, like we're going to run one API call for each of those 20 parameters, and then you're going to return yes or no. And those could be subjective, like give a detailed description of the city that the job takes place in. This was like for a remote or for a travel work thing. Give a detailed, did the job posting give a detailed description of the city that this person would be living in? It could respond yes or no, because that's subjective, but you could say, okay, that's one of the 20 data points to be a successful job. That kind of parameter, and it sounds like you're kind of doing similar with the grant writing, that kind of like parameter-based analysis an AI could do. But I think this is where like the AIs ultimately don't know like the taste and quality element, where it's like, if I said, make a high conversion, really good job posting that like candidates would really want to apply to, it would spit something out. But I could actually guarantee it would not necessarily be something that actually would be high conversion. It really would be something that sounds high conversion. So to your right. So to your earlier point about like what's missing from the reasoning standpoint, I think it's a little bit of a model improvement to like not just answer the question that's asked every single time. I also think there's a little bit of like a business workflow question that needs to be answered where we say, okay, we're not going to say AI make the smartest and best post, but instead we say we're going to give the agent the ability to edit the landing page to optimize for conversions. And then we're also going to give it the data source of all of the conversions in real time. And we're going to have it edit the copy of the landing page every single day based on the data. Like that kind of thing, not a lot of companies are doing. I'm struggling to do it myself and I want to do more of it. But I feel like it's like that plus maybe hopefully a little bit of smarter model leads to something like this being fully actualized.
Good company brain. My experience recently is like we're trying to add context to it so it can be smarter.
Yeah.
But like all the company's knowledge is spread through Slack, Confluence, Salesforce, now all the meetings of Google Meet are like there's notes that have been transcribed, like there's tons of all this stuff. So do you find that people are now like connecting all that and is actually helpful, or is it just garbage file?
Yeah, I would say I think it's really helpful to connect it. It's important from like a internal discussion to decide where that stuff's going to live and how we're going to set it up. But like for my own personal use, what I have is I have, let's see if I can kind of pull this up actually. Here's my internal CRM. It's nothing crazy, but like you can see here, we track like tasks, projects, work, timesheets, accounts, pipeline, invoices, and then also call transcripts in our web-based CRM system. So that all lives there, and that's kind of the source of truth for that item. So like when we have a Google Meet, I set up a N8N workflow that captures the Gemini notes and transcript, and then looks through the client emails and tries to match it to a client file, and then saves it to our CRM. So we basically have the structured data there. And then we give the AI agent access to Slack and Gmail and Google Drive in addition to this. And that works extremely well, I would say. Where I feel like it would fail is if we didn't have the source of truth for like one unit of data. Like if half of our invoices were in platform A and then half were in platform B, I feel like the AI would really get bogged down by that. But like all our invoices and like customer data and so on is in the CRM. And then all of the like chat stuff is in Slack. And then all of the emails are obviously in Gmail. That gives it like the right distribution of knowledge to like access those things and be a really helpful company brain.
That's the art of it, right? Because like I've found this, we would do product requirements in linear, it's like
Mhm.
very clean and easy to feed in. Then
Yeah.
there's all this like discussion of, in Slack of, well, let's change all the requirements to this, right? And then if
Yeah.
it's getting both of those, then it was a little got muddy very quickly.
Yeah, for sure. And that's where I would say, maybe in your case, not knowing your business really, but I would say like, could linear be the source of truth for product requirements so that when we have that conversation in Slack, we're having the agent also in the Slack channel, and then we assign an emoji to, go update linear so that we put an emoji on that thread that says, okay, agent, go look at this thread, and then propose edits to the linear documentation. Something like that might be a good solution. I don't know, maybe you already tried that. I don't like offering solutions to things I don't know that much about, but like, you know, that is to that notion of like, it's like the discipline within the company to say, we're all going to use these AI systems. We're all going to believe they're going to work and be helpful. And we're all going to treat them a certain way. Because if I treat linear as a source of truth, and then you treat a Slack canvas as a source of truth, like the whole thing's going to blow up and it becomes very hard to manage. Even with my team of like 8 people, it's hard to adopt all of this stuff as engineers and a small team. We're still struggling with it for sure.
But that's what I had too, because my last job was managing a pretty big team.
Mhm.
Just getting people to do basics together is really hard.
Yeah.
Much less like as it gets more nuanced, that's very tricky.
Yeah, I can imagine. And yeah, I think that's where I think you are seeing some of these like individuals be able to produce a lot, but then you don't see some of those gains always brought by the team because, you know, it's very easy to move fast when you don't have to talk to anyone else. But, that doesn't always work all the time. So that's interesting how it's evolving, I guess. Even over my time of working, I feel like I've seen it evolve quite a bit. So would love to hear more about yours.
Yeah, on that same thread, how do you kind of manage the AI agents that your team's using? And like, how do you kind of determine that you're getting ROI out of them? Like, keep track, are they actually useful? Are they breaking? Am I having duplicative agent work?
Yeah.
Like, it feels like it adds a layer of complexity or intentional thinking to kind of orchestrate all that.
Intentional thinking is key. And I think that it's like, I'll say, like, for me, business owner mindset, it's a lot of investment in time. So, we have a meeting where we go over what are we all doing in AI? Like, let's compare notes. We, have a lot of one-on-one session of us, teaching each other and building each other up. And we also make a conscious effort to invest in tools, research more tools, and see if they're going to be a good fit and do that collectively. So like it's not something that we just like, decided to turn on one day and then we're like, oh, this is great. We're just so much more productive. It really is like a practice and a discipline like any other. The only thing I can like relate it to is kind of like the discipline that follows like a project management, methodology, like adopting agile as an organization, like requires a discipline and collective buy-in from everybody. And it reminds me a little bit of that. And some other like business strategy stuff that I've done in the past is kind of similar. Um, in terms of getting everyone on the same page, we have a repository for our organization of kind of like our common knowledge and markdown files about what we do that anyone can update and we kind of collectively maintain. So that kind of keeps us all on the same page so that, when we do have a new thing, everyone's getting it distributed. And then on some of the teams we've worked with, back to the Claude Cowork thing, one of the things that's really nice on the team level, because we've rolled this out to some companies we work with, is that as the administrator of a team, you can turn access to the connectors on and off for the organization. You can build skills and maintain skills and distribute those to the organization. So that would be one piece. And then the last is we give back to the kind of like internal CRM we built over here. We give everyone scoped tokens to in here, the API keys. We give them scoped tokens that they can share with their agent on their integrations that can perform the same actions that they could here in the interface. So like, maybe they don't want to enter timesheets manually or whatever. They could have their agent, which can perform the same actions as them, but only limited to the same actions that their user token can provide. perform those actions for them as well. So we kind of manage the access on that level.
You mentioned Agile as like a framework. Is that a framework you use in that case, or are there other frameworks that are coming, methodologies that are coming alive to think about how to execute AI as a team or as an organization?
I am not aware of any frameworks for like AI implementation too much. Like I should say, I haven't tried any myself other than kind of like we're all gonna figure this out together and kind of track outcomes like we would. I'm a big fan of the EOS kind of system and methodology for like business operations. It's the entrepreneur operating system, which is kind of like how you track progress and implement change. And we kind of used that to lead our AI implementation. But I don't have any like AI specific ones. To me, it's kind of like adopting anything else, but just takes a lot of time and I don't know, it's kind of a lot of work to get it going for everybody.
Harder in big companies, I'm sure, than smaller, companies.
Oh yeah. Yes, I agree. Um, I'm thankful that we can move at the speed we can and kind of make the decisions we can. And then even on an individual level too, I love AI tools and love just trying them out and doing a free trial. We talked about a lot of great things too. I'm just checking time. We're kind of coming to the end of the session. This QR code just goes to my LinkedIn. I'd be happy to share the slides or anything else we've talked about today, or just kind of stay in touch with local Portland people who are building things in the tech ecosystem. As I mentioned, I'm, Portland native, but recently kind of back in the area. So excited to just see what other people are doing. Some conversations before this presentation, before we got started with it, were already really inspiring. So if you want to connect, that's me. And I'd be happy to talk about any of these ideas in more detail. This is like bar none my favorite topic. And everyone in my life is sick of me talking about it. So I'm really thankful for you all coming out and PJUG for having me talk about this today because, yeah, my wife, friends, and family are like, please go find somewhere else to talk about this. We're sick of it.